Good morning, Roxy Soxy.
Good morning, Tam Tam, or should I say good morning after the Oscars?
I was thinking of you. I'm in Austin, so we don't have any cable where we are. So I'm just like refreshing to see who is winning. So what did you think of the Oscars this year? And do you think the movies were as great as other years? I have my own thoughts on it, but I want to hear yours first.
Okay. So basically, I thought obviously it was a departure from years past. They moved the whole thing from the Dolby Theater to Union Station in downtown LA. And of course, like COVID practices were in place. So it was like very socially distanced and only really the presenters and nominees were in attendance. So they didn't have any sort of red carpet press or anything like that. So I missed
you were at home.
Yeah. Home in my PJs, which actually was kind of nice,
Yeah, you were like, I get to work and I get to be comfortable. That's interesting.
No blisters on the feet. Like it was
Love
amazing.
it.
But you know what is so funny? This is the first year that I have not seen the nominated films.
Interesting. I have
Okay,
for some reason, and I accidentally watched the nominated films because it was the only thing that was available to see on the latest movies that have come out. And maybe that was a marketing ploy as well. It's like 2 weeks ago I saw Nomadland and I was like, this is actually a really good movie. Yeah. But I think this year, because of the pandemic last year, and it's still obviously we're having some remnants of it this year as well. I don't think there was as many movies made. So I don't think there was as many competition. So I don't know.
I personally think that Brad Pitt's man bun won the night. I'm just saying.
Why did we cut my husband's man bun off? That is the question.
Could have been right on trend.
Yeah, that could have been right on trend. Well, going completely departuring from this conversation, which is not about the Oscars or anything frivolous like this. On this show, I have spoken to you many times about, not the fear, but, the worry that I've never been diagnosed with something called ADHD. I've never really spoken about it in length, but I have talked to you on this podcast about it. So I was watching an influencer's YouTube channel, and she is actually going more into the vlogging where it's really going in depth for her own personal issues, her mental health issues. And she did an episode where she went into this doctor's office and she was testing herself getting tested for ADHD or ADD. And it was interesting when I watched it back because I thought, oh my goodness, everything that this girl was suffering from were things that I had suffered from. Now, I don't know if I have maybe developed ADHD. And this is what we can talk to him about over the years because of my job and always having to remember lines and forget them and being on social media consistently and using my screens all the time, which is not great for your brain chemistry. Or if it's something that I was born with and is genetic. So I'm actually going to go into his clinic when I get back to Los Angeles, the California area. And I'm going to get tested and see, what's going on. So today we have Daniel Amen. Please tell me if I've got that right. Psychiatrist. He's a 12-time best-selling author. He's got 12 million on his podcast, Brain Warrior. He's the founder of Amen Clinics. So welcome, Daniel.
Welcome. Yay.
Thank you so much for having me.
So my first question is, because I'm going to see you in a couple of weeks' time, for people who don't know, what are the signs and symptoms for ADHD?
So they can be different for girls than for guys. But I think of 5 hallmark symptoms. And the first one is short attention span. And that's why it's called attention deficit disorder. Or they changed the name in 1987. They sort of messed it up. They changed it to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. But about half the people who have it are never hyperactive. And so that's why is it ADD or ADHD? But it's short attention span, but that symptom actually fools people because it's not short attention span for everything. It's short attention span for regular routine, everyday things, the things that make life work. But for things that are new, novel, highly interesting, stimulating, or frightening, people can, with ADD, terrible ADD, can pay attention just fine. So if they love a teacher,
Hmm.
the teacher won't notice their ADD. But if the teacher is just sort of regular, ordinary, or bad, they can't pay attention at all. New love, for example, is a drug. So the first 3 or 4 months of a relationship, they're locked in and can pay attention just fine. But as the relationship goes on, their mind begins to wander. So short attention span. The second one is they're easily distracted. They see too much, they hear too much, they feel too much. And, in order to pay attention, you sort of have to be able to decrease the noise going on. When I grew up 3 houses from the freeway in the San Fernando Valley, but I never heard the freeway because my brain just sort of blocked it out. People with ADD can't do that. And so they're always paying attention to extraneous things that they don't need to. And as little kids, they hate seams, they hate tags. My first wife had ADD. And after we got married, I went into my closet and she had cut all of the tags out of my shirts. And I was sort of offended by it. And I went into the living room and I'm like, do you know who cut all the tags out of my shirts? And she said, well, I did. I thought you'd be so happy about that. Don't they bother you? And I'm like, I've never felt a tag in my life. But little kids are always taking their clothes off because the seams on the socks bother them or the tags. The third one is they tend to be disorganized, especially for time. So they tend to be late or almost always late because they actually don't start getting ready until they're late, until they get this, oh my God, I'm late thought in their head, and space. And so if you look at their rooms, their desks, their book bags, their filing cabinets, they can be a mess. Now, they say they're very organized by the tile system. Don't organize for them because then they'll never find anything. They tend to procrastinate. That's number 4, or they sort of put things off to the last minute. And 5 is they can be impulsive. They say things perhaps they shouldn't say, or do things perhaps that weren't helpful. A lot of my ADD patients come into my office and they say, Doc, I'm brutally honest. And in my mind, I think, well, that's usually not helpful. Jerry Seinfeld once said, the brain is a sneaky organ. We all have weird, crazy, stupid, sexual, violent thoughts that nobody should ever hear. And when you have ADD often, and we'll see in your brain, you often have sleepy frontal lobes, which means a little bit less activity or blood flow to the front part of your brain, which is your supervisor. It's the part of your brain that watches you. And it can just be so frustrating because you go, why did I do that? And can get you sort of into hot water with people you really care about.
Wow. Well, that is quite the diagnosis.
I'm like, oh my God. I'm sitting here crying because I realized wow, I thought that everyone lived like this. I thought everyone was distracted easily and everyone was some people were disorganized, some were better than others. I'm sure Roxy's better than me. But I thought that walking into a kitchen, my husband can't understand. I walk into a kitchen and the fact that there's so much on the table, I start to panic. I get paralyzed. I don't know what to do. And he'll have a conversation with me and I'll start, if it's really interesting, I'll be able to listen. But if it starts to he's a little long-winded, I do love him. But if it starts to get long-winded, I will start thinking, I will just can't stay with the conversation. I thought everyone was like that.
Yeah, about 10% of the population is like that. Now, people with ADD are often amazing. Has nothing to do with IQ.
Well, I'm just kidding.
Often leaders of organizations. They're often very creative artists. Actually, if you have a little bit sleepy frontal lobes, you see the world differently than other people, which is actually where creativity comes with. And so the only reason to treat it is if it's sort of getting in your way. And I have so many success stories of how one of my favorite ones is this guy I saw who was a trucker. And I went into my waiting room to get him, to bring him back to my office. And I was watching him draw this literally amazing, intricate piece of art. I'm like, wow. I'm like, you're so talented. He said, but I can't make a living at it because I can never finish it on time for people. And after I diagnosed him and treated him, he got a job at Disney making over $100,000 a year. He was just so grateful. Because a lot of people go, oh, no, I don't want to treat it because I don't want to lose my creativity. Except when you treat it, you become more creative because you finish things. And you're better at follow through. I mean, it's such an interesting conversation. And both of my wives, Tana, who I do our podcast with, has ADD. I don't know. I just love women with ADD. I don't know what's going on. But they can be just incredibly creative and spontaneous and fun. But my wife never met a wrapper she ever wanted to throw away or a cabinet she actually ever wanted to close. So I have this beautiful white German Shepherd. She taught the dog to close the cabinets.
That's fun. Wow.
Roxy, do you suffer from that?
You know what? I feel like it's used a lot because maybe a lot of people don't understand the exact definition of it, right? And some people might think, oh, I can't focus a lot. So maybe I have it. Or like if the misdiagnosed like hyperactivity sort of component, same as that. But I think, my mind definitely wanders. Like if I become so maybe that's the question then. Like if you become disinterested, like Tammin was saying, like in a long-winded conversation, or, you feel like you can't focus. I mean, is that ADD also, or is that just, you're losing interest in something?
Well, it could be that they're bored. I mean, that's possible. And technology has dramatically increased the expression of ADD. Because the human attention span online 20 years ago was not long. It was 20 seconds. Now it's 8 seconds. Because as you outsource your memory and you're always being pinged by this thing that was created to be addictive. Anyone who says that's not true is just lying about it. They took neuroscientists and said, how do I hook people with this? Where food companies want stomach share, companies like Google and Facebook and Microsoft, they want mind share. And they're stealing our attention span. And so, Tammin, the question would be, and for the people who are listening, is ADD is not something you develop when you're 25. It's something you have your whole life, and you come from people who have it. So you can either see it in your mom or your dad or your grandpa. And typically teachers started noticing it. Now, the brighter you are, the later they notice it. But they say things like, oh, she'd just do so well if she could pay attention, or she's easily distracted, or she's the class clown and always interrupting with something fun or funny to say. And you begin to see the trail. Sometimes when it just pops up when someone's 17, they're smoking pot. I know everybody thinks marijuana is innocuous, but it's not. Or they had a head injury playing soccer, or they were in a car accident. And that is one of the most common causes of people who think they have adult ADD, but didn't have it when they were 7, 10, 12, so on. So how about for you, Tammin? Tell us about what elementary school was like for you.
So I was a child actor very early on in my life because I was a child actor. So I was on set at 14 years old. So I think that it was masked for so many years because I was just meant to learn scripts, act, and then I had to keep, it's kind of like perfect for ADD. Learn a scene, do the scene, learn the next scene. So no one really picked up on it. I was kind of at my parents' house still, but I moved into my own house that I bought at 18 years old. And it wasn't affecting me like it is now as I get older. Now I find it hard to be in the moment with my kids because I'm thinking of something else or read a script. And it's starting to affect my daily life and giving me anxiety because I'm not able to concentrate to the level that I want to concentrate. And there's a lot of shame that's kind of coupled in with that too. My dad was in marketing. My mom worked with him. She's an avid reader. I never saw them jump sentences like I do. But it's interesting that you said that maybe you can see it in, your family. I didn't see it in my, immediate family, but I am seeing it in my kid. My kid is doing the things that I do, which is the class clown, not being able to pay attention. She's incredibly, very creative, which is like her parents, but my husband's creative and he doesn't have the same issues as I do. So I'm really not sure. That's why I was asking, is it hereditary or is it something you can develop, or maybe you've always had it, but it gets worse because of the environment that you're in?
And fame makes it worse. In my book, I talk about the things that steal dopamine. And dopamine is the neurotransmitter that is less effective in ADD. And the medications or the supplements we use to treat ADD increase dopamine. And the problem with fame is it wears out the dopamine centers in your brain when something really great happens, when you get noticed, when you sign a contract, when you're signing autographs. It's releasing too much dopamine, which actually begins to wear out your pleasure centers. And then you need to do something just to feel normal, just to feel any good at all, which is why so many young actors and singers and celebrities have drug abuse problems because they're trying to feel normal. And in my new book, Your Brain is Always Listening, I talk about there's actually a new 12-step program in there. The 12-step program for addictions was developed 85 years ago, and there's no neuroscience. And I'm a fan. I've sent thousands of people to 12-step programs, but I'm like, we could do better. Let's put a little neuroscience to this. And there's one step on, well, let's drip dopamine, stop dumping dopamine. So if you do a concert that dumps dopamine, and then, oh, by the way, you don't get to sleep till 3 o'clock in the morning because your body's so jazzed up that your brain health habits are completely trashed. So we want to actually rebuild those pleasure centers. Now that you have kids, those habits to do that are great for you, but they're also great for the kids.
We're sort of coming out of this time right now, which we've all been under this lockdown, and it's like sort of coming out of this post-pandemic. And I know a lot of people are experiencing anxiety and depression and like sort of all the things that we've been in ADD and everything like throughout this whole time. And we're sort of expected to now kind of reemerge into society, and like make the jump back in. But like from a brain health and like a mental health standpoint, like what is like the best way to do that, to kind of like go back into, what is hopefully going to be normal life soon.
So on May 15th, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but I'm going to do a 30-day happiness challenge. Americans are the unhappiest they've been in my lifetime. So not since World War II have we had the level of depression and suicide and anxiety disorders. And now with pharmaceutical industry success, more people are taking drugs, prescribed drugs than ever before in human history. And I'm like, okay, there's a better way to do this. And the first thing is to make sure you're engaging in regular brain healthy habits. And, happiness is really unique to your own brain. And ADD brains, happy things are way different than an OCD person's brain's happy things, right? The OCD person, I call them the persistent people, they love routine. Routine just settles them and they love it. The ADD person bores them to tears. They
hate routine.
Exciting. It's like, let's
it's not fun at all.
Right. So you have to know your brain type. But then the food you eat really does matter. The thoughts you allow in your head really matters. And I have a term I use called ants, that we're just infested as a society with automatic negative thoughts, the thoughts that just come into your mind automatically and ruin your day. And what I teach my patients, and I didn't know this till I was 28 and a psychiatric resident, that, oh, by the way, I don't have to believe every stupid thing I think, and that I can direct my mind to help me or hurt me, that I have a choice. And many people who have ADD, and Tim, and I'd be interested to know this about you, is they actually use negativity as a stimulant. That
oh my God.
They really are hard on themselves and they can be hard on other people, because when you have a nice thought, oh, she's just such a kind, sweet person, it's awesome. It produces a little bit of oxytocin and serotonin, but there's no dopamine in that. Oh, but when you go, he's an awful human being, or you are awful, there's some dopamine going.
My husband says to me that when everything is calm and everything, he says this in our arguments, he says, it's almost like you're fighting with me because you need some kind of rush or to feel something. And I was like, and then I get angry about that. I say, well, what are you trying to say? Like, of course I'm not. I'm angry because of this. But we only fight when there's been too many days of good.
Wow. And so what moms often tell me is with their kids, if we have a good morning at home, he has a bad day at school. But if we have a bad morning at home, he has a good day at school, which is just what you're saying, that you use negativity and conflict as a stimulant unconsciously. I'm certain it's unconscious. You don't know you're doing it. But in my book, Healing ADD, which I'll send you or I'll give it to you when you come see me. And the book starts with, I know you're not going to read this book.
It's hard to read the whole thing. Audiobooks are good when you're hiking. Yes.
But there's a chapter in Healing ADD called The Games ADD People Play. And the first game they play is Let's Have a Problem. Because that's where the juice is. That's where the adrenaline, the dopamine, the stimulation is. And I remember one woman, in fact, I tell this story in Healing ADD, she said, I can't believe a little yellow pill, which for her was Ritalin, took me from someone who was screaming at my children to then looking at them going, aren't they sweet?
Wow. The more you're talking about this, especially with the negative thoughts,
She's like,
the
maybe.
more I'm like, the more it's
Self-diagnosis.
resonating with me. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's so funny because lately we've been talking about this on our podcast, is how these negative like thoughts from your brain affect your physical health. And I can even tell you, like, over the last week, these negative thoughts have literally made my stomach sick, and like given me back pain, and like it's just like, it just does not seem, it's so bad for me to like internalize these in that way and let them affect me. So how do we stop that? Like, how do we stop these negative thoughts from like making us sick, literally,
So like you have to eat well on a consistent basis in order to have a healthy body. You have to practice managing your mind on a regular basis, right? I mean, you can't be 50 pounds overweight on Monday, have a salad, and expect to be trim on Friday. So you have to work at it. And I collect anteaters.
Interesting collection.
Interesting
Interesting item to collect. Yeah. Let's put it that way.
So here's the exercise. Whenever you feel sad or mad or nervous or out of control, write down what you're thinking. Because the act of writing actually helps to get the thought out of your head and then question it. So, for example, if you have the thought, my wife never listens to me, I've had that thought, I write it down. And then I have 5 simple questions. I actually stole these from my friend Byron Katie, but they're amazing. Is it true? And I'm like, well, no. I've written 15 public television specials on the brain, and she's listened to all of them. Maybe she's just not listening to me today. Second question, is it absolutely true? With 100% certainty, she never listens to me. No, that's ridiculous. Third question is, how do I feel when I believe the thought? I feel sad. I feel lonely. I feel disconnected from her, and I'm angry because I'm a good husband. Fourth question, who would I? So what 3 teaches you is it's your thoughts that create your feelings. Feelings then create behaviors. So if you really want to feel better and act better, you have to control the ants. You don't want to let the infestation stick around. The fourth question is, how would I feel without the thought? Well, I'd feel happy and be a good husband. But the fifth question's the most important, and it's the most interesting. And if you do this 100 times, you actually go to the fifth question automatically. Fifth question is, take the original thought that's bothering you, my wife never listens to me, and turn it to the opposite, which could be, my wife does listen to me. Never go to the narcissistic opposite where she always listens to me. That's ridiculous. Nobody does that. Or it could go to, I never listened to her. And I'm like, oh. So as soon as you have a thought, question it, carry those 3 little words around with you everywhere. Is it true? And then just go to the opposite. It's just so helpful. Another technique I give my patients is give your mind a name. And it's based on a concept called psychological distancing. And it's like, you don't have to attach to it. Your thoughts come from all sorts of places. Some of them are written in your genes based on what your mom, dad, grandparents thought and experienced. We know, for example, great-grandchildren of people who were in the Holocaust have a higher incidence of PTSD, anxiety, and depression. I mean, some of that trauma got written into their genes. They come from what your mother and dad said when you were a child. They come from siblings. They come from friends. They come from the news. And thoughts lie all the time. Some of them are helpful. Some of them are hurtful. And so when you learn to manage your mind, your level of happiness goes way up. As part of the happiness challenge, we're going to talk a lot about killing the ants.
So what happens if you do have ADHD? And what we were just talking about is happy thoughts don't give you that dopamine and that adrenaline rush. If you're telling yourself that everything's great and you're doing those affirmations, doesn't that automatically then not give you as much dopamine as, let's say, an argument? So, like, how do people with ADHD get that dopamine that they get from things like arguments or drugs? I've never taken drugs, but I find myself wanting, I drink 2 drinks a week, but my anxiety and my ADHD sometimes flare, and I want to have a drink because it calms my brain down, gives me a little bit of dopamine, makes me feel comfortable within my own skin. I'm a very nice person when I've had a glass of wine, but when that wine wears off, my dopamine starts to come down and I start to get more aggressive. I notice that even the little bits of wine that I use to try to like regulate myself. So what do you do with someone who's suffering from ADHD? What are the methods that they can take? And also, does it have to be Ritalin? Can it be natural? Do you use supplements? How do you help people who are suffering from ADHD?
So it doesn't have to be a stimulant.
Because coffee is great for me, but gives me anxiety.
Yeah, and coffee is not a great treatment for ADD because caffeine constricts blood flow to the brain and ramps up your anxiety. So exercise is
that's my number one. Mm-hmm.
If my wife didn't exercise, she would be depressed. So exercise is really important. Omega-3 fatty acids, especially EPA. People don't know that. People go, oh, yeah, I take omega-3s, but they may be taking high DHA, which is better for anxiety and memory. But EPA has been shown to be helpful for mood and anxiety. I make something called Focus and Energy that has ashwagandha, ginseng, rhodiola, and choline, all things to support dopamine and attention span while also calming you. Theanine from green tea, really good. Helps calm anxiety.
L-theanine?
L-theanine.
That is the one supplement that has changed my anxiety. I don't have panic attacks because I'm on L-theanine.
How much do you take?
Oh man, they're little chewables called sun-theanine. I take about 4 a day. I can check what the dosage is of that. But when I'm feeling anxious, my child also takes half every now and then. It's been wonderful for our family.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. Also, meditation, especially a Kundalini yoga form of meditation called Kirtan Kriya. It's a singing meditation and it's beautiful. I guess it depends on your voice. But it's basically sa ta na ma, sa ta na ma, sa ta na ma. 12 minutes has been shown to increase blood flow to your frontal lobes, actually strengthen your blood flow. So if you're thinking exercise on a regular basis, the right nutritional supplements, meditation, hypnosis is also really powerful. It's like, well, and change your diet, right? Your diet really does matter. I want all of my patients to basically be gluten, dairy, corn, soy, sugar, artificial crap free, because those things don't really serve your brain. They did a study out of Holland, and they took 300 ADHD children, put them on an elimination diet. They fed them vegetables, fruit, lamb, turkey, rice, pear juice. That was it. 3 months later, 72% of the kids did not have ADD. So did they have ADD, or was it their diets that was poisoning them? So if you think of diet, supplementation, the right mental habits, because yes, being sweet in your family may not give you the rush, but it gives you what you want.
Of course.
Close relationship with your husband and kids. And so if you can supervise yourself to go, all right, am I going after dopamine at the expense of wearing out my husband? You don't want that. That doesn't anywhere fit the goals you have. And so for all of my patients, but especially my ADD patients, we do an exercise called the 1-page miracle. On one piece of paper, I want you to write down, what do you want? Relationships, work, money, physical, emotional, spiritual health. What do you want? So, for example, with Tana, I want a kind, caring, loving, supportive, passionate relationship. I always want that. I don't always feel like that. I get these rude thoughts in my head. Generally, I choose not to say them because it's not going to get me what I want. And so we talked about, is it true? Another 3 words I love: does it fit? Does it fit the goals I have for my relationships? And one thing with ADD moms is they do way too much for their kids because they're not patient, and they're like, oh, I'll just do it. And that's bad, bad, bad. I love a parenting program called Parenting with Love and Logic, where it actually teaches kids to pay consequences when the cost of misbehavior is cheap, right? If you don't do this until they're teenagers or young adults, the cost of misbehavior is very expensive. And it's like, look, I don't do things for people who aren't nice to me. Or it's so important for kids to have chores, especially kids of famous people, because they can grow up with a sense of entitlement because the parents were working so much. They feel so guilty. They want the kids to have everything. And that's a prescription for raising unhappy children that feel entitled. And so doing the right things, but parenting that way requires attention and a lack of impulsivity, because when you follow through, you give them a consequence. You want to make sure you have the patience to follow through. Does that make sense?
Yes, so much so.
God, I
Especially
feel
with homeschooling. Yeah, right, Roxy?
yeah, with homeschooling. And oh my God, the whole time I thought I was a helicopter mom, because that's what happens. I see my daughter, trying to do something, a task, and I get impatient and I'm like trying to get it done. I'm like, we could, time is running out. Like, we need to get this done. And so I get what is can you be a helicopter mom and not have, or a helicopter parent and not have ADHD, or is that always together?
Or you could just be worried. But
stress.
I'll give you a love and logic strategy that my wife did with my daughter. And they used to fight over homework. And I'm a child psychiatrist. I used to look at her and go, you've done second grade. This is Chloe to do. And, but her anxiety would cause her, and they would fight about it. And then she got the love and logic tapes. And she announced to Chloe one night, she said, Chloe, I've done second grade. I'm never again going to ask you to do your homework. And if you're okay with the consequences of not doing it, like having to stay in at recess or having the teacher mad at you, that's on you. And if you really don't do it, well, you're a really nice child. When you have to repeat second grade, you'll make new friends. Boy, that was the moment. Chloe said, I never said I wasn't going to do it. I'm just not going to do it now. She stormed off. 20 minutes later, she came back. She's graduating from high school in about a month with a 4.2. She just got into TCU in Fort Worth. I'm so proud of her because Chloe owns her life. And she doesn't really need her mom, which is a whole different issue between her and her mom, right? But that's what you want as a parent. You want people who are in charge of their own lives.
Ownership and accountability for sure. But it's hard to teach kids these days now because we've been through this whole, sort of homeschooling thing, and we're living distantly from one another. So with this sort of new world we've been in, what are some tips to kind of get these kids back on the right track?
Right.
One, we can't let the pandemic be an excuse. Every generation goes through hard times.
Yeah.
I love what C.S. Lewis wrote in 1948. So C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors, he wrote Chronicles of Narnia, the Screw Tape Letters, my favorite book, The Great Divorce. And he's like, and he was writing about the atomic bomb, but you could just replace it with COVID-19, which is why is everybody so upset? Because the scientists have figured out yet another way to kill us when you are already condemned to death. And oh, by the way, you could have lived in London in the 16th century when the plague visited every year. Or you could have lived in a Viking age when raiders from Scandinavia could land and slit your throat any night. It's like, if the bomb comes, let it find us doing sensible and human things. People aren't talking enough about the benefits of the pandemic. 8 out of 10 families.
Yeah. We are so close.
We've had 3 generations of 2-parent working families, and that has strained the bond between parents and children because women are tired. And you know, people will take that the wrong way. It's not how I mean it. I'm just a child psychiatrist and say what I think, that parents need time with their children. And because of the pandemic, they've gotten a lot more time. And quite frankly, I'm a huge fan of homeschooling because parents are actually supervising what the kids are learning. And as long as the parents aren't drinking too much or too stressed out themselves, I know a lot of them have been, this has been a historically positive time for children because they're closer to their moms and dads.
I find the homeschooling has been hard on our family because my husband and I both work, and we're in the creative fields. My husband's, getting ready to direct a movie. And so he's been on a lot of Zooms, and, I'm also doing my business. So when you say supervising, we're supervising her, but we haven't had the time to sit down because we have homework it takes us 2 to 3 hours at night for her to do her homework because she doesn't want to do it. I feel like the pandemic has been hard because a lot of parents, for me and maybe you, Roxy, because a lot of parents have been both working at home at the same time and then also had their kids at home trying to get them up to speed. And I worry that we have lost some education, right?
Yeah, we're not natural teachers, a lot of us, so it's like, it's so frustrating when you're sitting there, doing like the math problem for like the 10th.
And I don't even understand it. It's first grade. I'm like, what do you mean a 10 is a line? Like, I don't understand.
Yes, it's so confusing.
Which is great for you to teach them to ask questions of the teacher when they don't understand. And that's where we have to put it back on the educational system. It's like, help me. And I always tell my kids, it's the smartest person who asks for help, not the dumbest person. And, when those things are happening, I'm not a fan of kids doing 2 or 3 hours of homework. To me, that's a sign that something's the matter. Em, what grade is your daughter in?
First grade.
Yeah, that sounds insane to me.
Because she doesn't want to do the work. The problem isn't this is what's hard. I don't know if she knows it and she's playing me or if she doesn't know it. Because there'll be days where she can't say one of the spelling words and then other days where she'll rattle them off like it's a ingredient list. Like so I'm not sure what's happening.
What does her say?
She's drawing pictures.
Maybe like mama, and she's very creative.
But again, it's over Zoom. My daughter is extremely social. She loves to be around kids. So for her to see them through a computer screen, I think might be affecting her way to learn.
How did she do? Was she in the pandemic for both kindergarten?
Yes, end of kindergarten and all of first grade.
Yeah. And the beginning of kindergarten, how did she do?
She was great. The only note was she needs to concentrate and stop drawing pictures.
When's her birthday?
She's a Libra. She's October 8th.
So she started kindergarten when she was 5?
Yes.
5 in a couple of months?
Yes.
Okay. Because, for everybody listening, if you have a choice, start them later than earlier.
Oh, really?
Bray's the
Yeah, like
youngest.
I'm born in July, which means I just turned 5 and started kindergarten, which means the person who was born in May had 10 months on me, which at that time meant he's like almost 20% older than I am. And
that's exactly what I'm facing right now. Yeah.
I'm smaller than everyone. And I felt that. But then I was younger than everyone and felt that too. My wife, whose birthday's in December for some unknown reason, started kindergarten when she was 4. I mean, if you hate your children, do that. Put them so behind. So age matters as well. Oh, I'm so looking forward to meeting you.
I'm so excited. I don't think you understand. I feel like this is the first time I've felt seen in my entire life. Like I've always thought something was up. Like I was just a little strange, like it was like, why do I think like this? Why don't I think like other people? Why, Roxy's so organized. And like even doing the podcast with her, I'm like, she just always has her notes in on time. And she just always has, and I'm like scrambling till the last second before I have to do something else. Like, why am I not like the others? And not in a positive, not in a good, I'm sure, yes, let's think of a good way. Yes, I'm sure there's great attributes as well, but why do I struggle with these things that aren't that difficult? Why do I go to the grocery store and I can hear everyone talking to me? Sometimes you'll see in a movie, not talking to me, just talking. You've seen a movie where they'll show like someone, who's like discovered something terrible and the movie will slow down and everything will warp really slow and you can hear all the sounds too loud. I feel like that is a daily existence for me. I walk down the street and why is the wind so loud? And why is that dog barking over there? And I'm looking at my coffee and then the coffee's too hot I just thought everyone everyone's brain was constantly on fire. I thought that was normal.
Is that a sensory kind of a thing too? Like what you're describing, like with the light sounds,
Can't light too bright.
Yeah, too bright and stuff like that. Is that sensory also?
Very common. Now, not everybody with ADD has it. In the book, I actually talk about 7 different types of ADD. So there's classic, hyperactive, restless, impulsive, can't concentrate. There's an attentive ADD where they're really not very impulsive or hyperactive, but can't concentrate, easily distracted. There's over-focused ADD, worried, rigid, inflexible, plus the ADD stuff. Often have parents or grandparents who are alcoholics. There's temporal lobe ADD, where one or both of their temporal lobes got hurt, where they often can have reading problems or reading social cue problems. Limbic ADD, where that's sort of ADD plus depression. Anxious ADD, where they're anxious and inattentive, or this pattern I call the ring of fire. You just said you felt like your brain was on fire, where the brain works way too hard and you just notice everything. And calming that down can just be so helpful. And whatever we see on your scan, Timon, is good news because you have what you have. If we can uncover it and then work to optimize it, right? You don't need to be fixed. You're already amazing. It's just, can we tune it better? If you think whatever your favorite car is, it's like, it has a great engine and maybe it's just not tuned right. And so you just have to balance it a little bit better so you can stay connected and do the work you want to do.
Roxy, will you go in too, please?
Yes, I need to.
Can you come in with me, please, Roxy? It's time. You need to scan your brain. Yes. I don't think your brain is as messed up as mine, but
no, there's something definitely going on because all the things he's been describing, I'm like, check. So we should do a 2-for-1.
I mean, I wouldn't say that I don't think you have ADHD, but knowing you for as long as I have, the obvious traits of ADHD you don't exhibit.
No, but you know what though? But the negative, like these negative thoughts, losing concentration pretty easily. I mean, I don't think I have any sort of like hyperactivity, but like even some of the sensory stuff, like I get so now maybe this is just I'm annoyed with my husband, but we get in the car sometimes and he always has the music automatically turned up like super loud. And it's literally like the first thing when I get in, I'm like, just turn it down, like turn it off. Or like if the light in the living room, we have this one light in our living room that's so bright and like just obnoxious. And I'm like, oh my God, that I can't have that light on when I'm in that room. Like it's like weird little things like that. So I don't know if that cumulatively kind of like puts me in that picture. I mean, I probably
maybe a little.
Maybe a little. I think
We have to scan your brain.
I know. We have to go in for a brain scan. Maybe a little OCD too. I mean, maybe a little bit of.
I mean, I'm sure like over the years we've all, I don't know, got something.
Right.
But
Something.
but I just want to know what it's like to read a book. I don't think I've ever. I mean, I've probably read a few books if they were really incredible from start to finish. But I thought it was normal to open a book and just go to the parts you think are the best parts. Like if I had a health book, I can't read I would never start. When they do the introduction, it gives me anxiety even thinking about reading an introduction. I'm like, why am I reading something before I even have to read the first chapter? So if it's a health book, I would just jump to the sections that I think would help me. I wouldn't be able to read the whole page. And I thought that was normal. I thought that's what everyone did.
So that reminds me of a story. I saw this kid, and then I saw his dad, and then I saw his grandmother, and then I saw his great grandmother. She was 94. And I'm like, why are you here? I want to finish the paper. She said, I've never been able to finish the paper. And she said, you've been so helpful to my family. And she had terrible ADD, had it her whole life. And when she came back a month later for her first follow-up, she'd actually read her first book.
Wow. So is because a lot of people are going to listen to this episode and they're going to wonder, do I have ADD? Do I have these conditions, or do I simply lose interest sometimes? And would you say the difference is that it interferes with your life so much that it is then like ADD? Or how would people at home listening to this just say, okay, I might just, forget things, or I might not, listen all the time, or that kind of a thing, versus like having an actual, condition?
We all have ADD moments, especially, we have a society now that set us up to have more ADD with gadgets and bad food and news that is really not the news. It's about people scared and stuff like that. I think, do you have these symptoms? Have you had them a long time? And are they interfering with your life, either your relationships, your work, your money, the law for some people? The incidence of ADD in prison is really high.
Wow.
And if it's interfering with your life, getting help isn't a sign of weakness. And that's why I wrote a book called The End of Mental Illness. I hate the term mental illness. It shames people, it's stigmatizing, and it's wrong. These are brain health issues that steal people's minds. As Tammin comes in, we'll work to optimize the physical functioning of your brain, and then to program it so you don't believe every stupid thing you think. But it starts with the foundation of brain health, and it changes everything in such a good way. And as you model that life, it helps your babies, which then helps your grandbabies, because when your daughter was born, when both of you were born, you're actually born with all of the eggs in your ovaries you'll ever have. And throughout your life, your habits are either turning on or off certain genes to make illness more or less likely, yes, in you, but in your children and your grandchildren. It's just so important, which is why we have to do the right things for ourselves and then for our kids as well.
I'm so glad we're finally talking about ADD or ADHD. Not sure exactly what the difference is. Um, because, like Roxy said in the beginning of this podcast, the term is thrown around frivolously. And I've heard it my whole life. Oh, she can't read a book, she has ADD. Oh, she can't pay attention to the movie, she has ADD. You know, it doesn't have the stigma like a schizophrenia or a bipolar does, right? Because, you know, if someone said I have ADHD, they'd go, or ADD, they'd go, oh, you just can't think properly. So it doesn't have that stigma. And because it doesn't have that stigma, I think, I don't know, it feels like we don't study it as much and we don't talk about it as much. So there's so many people suffering who don't know what the issue is. I'm so grateful that you're here and you're giving us tips and tools and ways to like help people who are really suffering, because I know that this podcast has changed my life. I know that because I'm like, wow, there is no way I'm going to see you and you're not going to say, this is what we need to deal with and this is how we can help you. And it's going to change my life. It's going to change my relationships. It's going to change me as an actor. It's going to change the way I see the world, because I'm not going to be in this echo chamber all the time. And it's going to be incredible. So what you've done for me on this show, I'm sure you've done for many other people. So I'm super appreciative.
You know, let me say one more thing before we have to stop. Is the medications for ADD have gotten a bad rap. And it's all like I ever drug my kids. Yet, if they had diabetes, you would totally give them insulin. Or they had cancer, you chemotherapy. Undiagnosed, untreated ADD has a lot of bad consequences. And as we talk, you know, the first thing I'm going to suggest to you is not going to be Adderall or Ritalin. But if we need them, absolutely use them. It's unfair to not treat ADD. You know, I often say people who have ADD are like people who need glasses. You know, people who need glasses aren't dumb, crazy, or stupid. Their eyeballs are shaped funny and glasses help them focus. But ADD aren't dumb, crazy, or stupid. Their frontal lobes are sleepy. Now, we'll try to do the treatment as naturally as possible. But if a little bit of Ritalin or Adderall is helpful so you can focus and memorize things and have a more rational discussion with your husband, well, why not? I mean, they've actually been around longer than almost any of the other medications. And when used responsibly, you know, my daughter, who's now finished, she's 38, I used to think she wasn't that smart. And I'm horrified by having that. But I had to teach her her times tables over and over. And it's like fifth grade. She still has some more her times tables. And I had her tested. And, you know, the doctor basically she didn't have a high IQ. It's like you expect too much from her. She said, but she's going to be okay because she works so hard. But in 10th grade, she completely fell apart because she was staying up every night till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to get her homework done. And she came to me crying one night. Now, mind you, I'm a child psychiatrist, but she was never hyperactive. And when I scanned her, she totally had the ADD brain. I scanned her the next night on a little bit of Ritalin. She literally went from B's and C's, working her brains out, to straight A's for the next 10 years. And she got into the University of Edinburgh's veterinarian school, one of the best veterinarian schools in the world, because I activated her frontal lobes. So, you know, people just automatically dismiss medication. And I'm like, why wouldn't you use all the tools? Start naturally. But if it's not getting us where we want to go, medication is often worth it.
Or you go to the wrong medication. So you're misdiagnosed. It's not for ADHD and they think it's depression or anxiety. My friend's brother was on depression medication for 10 years. He felt terrible. He was like a zombie, got off that, got diagnosed for ADHD, is taking a small amount of Ritalin. He says he's the happiest person he's ever been. He has no depression. He can concentrate. His life is completely changed because he was misdiagnosed for something that wasn't the issue.
All the time. And especially in women, because when you have untreated ADD, you get depressed because you try and it doesn't work. And then you try and it doesn't work. And there's conflict with your kids or there's conflict with your husband. You go to the family doc, and of course, they won't look at your brain. Why would you want to do that? They put you on Lexapro or Prozac or Celexa or Zoloft. And they actually make your ADD worse, but they also decrease your anxiety. So you don't care your ADD is worse, which can completely blow up your relationships. The wrong medication can ruin people's lives.
Wow. So what like if we have like the Ritalin and the all the other medications, are there also some natural alternatives for treating ADD, like natural supplements or, exercises, or what do you recommend?
And we talked about some of them earlier, from exercise to omega fatty acids to things like focus and energy, thiamine. And that's generally where I like to start. And, I always believe first do no harm. What we do that's unique at Amen Clinics is we think we should actually look at your brain before we go messing with it. And so, Tammin, as we look at your brain based on our conversation, I'm like, well, I think it's going to be like this. Well, why wouldn't I look at it to know if it's like this? And to have a better sense, you're more likely to respond to this or that. Plus, when you see or scan, you develop something I call brain envy. You're going to want a better brain. Freud was wrong. Penis envy is just not the cause.
Damn it. That was my problem this whole time. I've always had that.
40 years of being a shrink. It's like, no, I want you to care and love your brain, because when you care and love your brain, everything in your life is better.
Can you tell, the last question before we let you go, can you tell what type of ADHD you have from your brain scan, or is that just something that we figure out by talking through?
Well, it'll be both, but I developed the types from the scans.
Right. Because you mentioned all of them and I was like, oh yeah, that one. Yep. I have that one too. The impulsive. I have the fire one. Check. I have that one. The can't finish the sentence. Yep. So it's all of them. Can you have all of them?
Well, if
it's like, well, I've never seen it before, but
if you have one, it automatically means you don't have two, because two is inattentive ADD without the hyperactivity.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, it's common to have 3 or 4. There's 33 combinations of them, and
well, my husband thanks you from the bottom of his heart. We've been together for 15 years. He thought that he was long-winded, which he is a little, but other people can listen. I always say I have a short attention span and he's long-winded. Like, what a match made in heaven. Lord. But thank you so much, right, Rox?
Thank you. We're so excited to have you, Dr. Amen. And I think I will also be making a point that we're coming together.
I'll turn up and I'll be like, Roxy, why are you behind me? Like, why did you follow me here?
Jumping in the brain scan with you. I'm like,
she's like, no, check my brain too. I think you've got a little something, but I don't think
there's something bad. I think there's something brewing in there. I think I'm pretty sure.
It's a little something. I think mine's messed up. No. Sean always says to me, like, what if they go in there and they go, what? There's no brain. It's like, what? I'm like, you're nice. You're really nice.
You're like, thanks, sweetheart. Thanks.
I used to, when I went to school, you were talking about school. I used to, I have a photographic memory. So I used to learn my essays off by heart through colors. And I thought everyone did that. So I would get really good grades, A's, A minuses, or not A pluses, but A's, because I would literally learn my entire essay and write it out. Now, I don't know what the case would have been if I had to just go in and do it, without having that skill. So that should have been the first telltale sign.
I know it's like
figure out how you learn.
I learned through colors and shapes, just like my daughter. And
he gave us so much to think about with our kids too.
I know, absolutely.
My daughter, is a July birthday, and she's the youngest in the class. So now I'm like, oh my God, did we do the wrong thing by putting her, starting her early?
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, I think for people listening, it's
Mhm.
probably not the best thing to do. So, you always did what you thought was best at the time.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be hard on yourself. Whenever we make a decision and we make a different decision, you just, support her the best you can.
Mhm.
And then see how she performs.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much for
you.
being here, for sharing your wisdom. Please, can you let our listeners know where people can find you, what books they can buy, your podcast? Just let everyone know where they can see you.
Well, I think for this podcast, Healing ADD is the perfect book. My new book, Your Brain is Always Listening, talks about the dragon tamer, which is for my ADD patients. They can find us at amenclinics.com. I have 9 clinics around the country. And my wife, Tana, and I do a podcast. We talk a lot about ADD on the podcast. It's called The Brain Warrior's Way. So go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
guys, you can find us on Women on Top Official on Instagram.
And Women on Top podcast on Facebook. And we have a Clubhouse group, Women on Top.
That we do. And don't forget to rate, subscribe, and comment, guys. We love you so much. Thank you for being here for
Thank
now
you.
almost 2 years.
I know.
I know. Over 100 episodes so far.
Damn it,
Rox,
we need
and you
to
haven't
have
got sick of me and my short attention span.
Damn it, we're having a blowout. We're having a blowout at that number 2.
Yes, we're having a blowout party with Riddle. I'm just kidding. Only if you need it. Only if you need it.
Only if you need it.
Only if you need it. Well, thank you guys so much. We love you. And I am Tammin Sursock.
And I am Roxy Manning.
And we are Women on